Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for the topic on ontologies, taxonomies, and models. Oh my, I am very excited about this session. Data modeling has very much been a interest and passion of mine for many years, and very happy to share some of my thoughts and experiences with you all, and hopefully um, can be of some help. So to introduce myself, my name is Keith Belanger. I am the technical partner and data vault practice lead at Eon Collective. I have been in data warehousing for over 25 years and have had a variety of roles over that time, from data modeler, data architect, um, ETL developer, BI architect. So I'm very happy to be able to share many of those experiences with everybody. So the first thing I want to do is kind of set a warning, the warning label, and I take a quote from Dan. I'm sure over the time you guys have seen or heard Dan say this statement, and I just think it's very appropriate in the context of this conversation to really reiterate it and bring it home again. And that is, data vault modeling was, is, and always will be about the business. We can always tend, especially on the IT side, to kind of sometimes lose that focus and why we're doing what we're doing. And ultimately, we work in data to bring the business and organizations that we are working with, um, information to make business decisions, to become data-driven organizations. So, we need to keep that focus in terms of why we're doing this. So when it comes to a data vault project, I've too often see projects that I've been on in organizations that I've worked with, is that this tendency for folks to like start off the project and let's just get right in it. Let's jump right in and start modeling our hubs, links, and satellites. And as fun and exciting as that can be, I usually want to warn people and say, take a pause, and there's some pre-work that you would want to do before you start doing that. And that's kind of what I want to go through today. The other thing I see is people taking that source system, and oftentimes it could be the first source system that they're working with, or maybe it's the primary source system of that organization. And they instantly start building a data vault or based around that source system, and that tends to be what we call a source system data vault, and that's something we want to avoid doing. And one of the reasons for avoiding that is, it's hard to integrate across many sources if you're focused on building a data vault on a singular source. Um, for most part, many, especially if an organization is using ERP systems or solutions like SAP or Salesforce, more often than not, those backend databases for those systems have been built in a way to be relatively generic, allowing organizations using them to configure them, set them up to fit their organization. What that means is then when you go look at the table structures, oftentimes the tables either have names that don't make sense unless you have some kind of reference diagram to go with it. Same with column names. Tables and columns that could be used for multiple scenarios within the application. And oftentimes it just doesn't meet the business that you're working with um, language within the organization. So those are just some things I wanted to kind of pre-warn and say, if you're finding right now that you're working that, you might want to take a time out with your peers and say, are we doing the right thing? And hopefully in this session, I'll kind of help walk you through, well, what are those right steps that you need to do before you just start going and do your hubs, links, and satellites. So the biggest thing we want to do is do what we take as a top-down approach. And what do I mean by a top-down approach? It means let's start with the business conceptual logical aspect and not take the bottom-up approach, which is looking at databases and tables and columns, right? Eventually, we're going to need the top-down and the bottom-up approach to come together. But for starters, let's take that top-down. Let's really get to understand the business we're working with. And I try to oftentimes, even if it's an organization I'm very familiar with or a vertical I'm familiar with, I try to take that bias hat off and play, I like calling it stump the chump, me being the chump, to really take that perspective of let me hear what the business has to say and take that in. So, one of the very first things we do is we want to take an enterprise ontology approach. What do we mean by an ontology? It's really putting together that picture of how that organization sees how that organization sees how they operate, and at the same time that defines how the business wants to see their data. um, Kind of taking another quote from Dan: an ontology is a working map to the data landscape, providing context to the developers, designers, and business users on how that data fits to the business, right? So what we want to do is model real life entities, real things that the business understands and communicates with. And let's start with those business concepts using terms that they're familiar with. I've seen some organizations call a customer. I've seen other organizations call them a a contract or other things like that. It's really, what does that business communicate? What language do they use? At the same time, is then as we're identifying those business concepts, is we want to understand the business keys that identify those concepts. Now, I could go into a whole nother hour presentation on business keys, and I'm going to avoid that for today. But at the same time, we're identifying those business concepts. We should be identifying those key business keys that are used to identify that. So, again, if, say, I'm talking about an employee, they often have an employee number. If it's an order, might have an order number. And those are some simplistic terms, but I know we've all been in some scenarios where the business key is a little bit more complex than that. But that is a key part of identifying the business concepts and its associated business keys. Not only are we, when we are identifying these business concepts, it's the other part is to drill into that taxonomy and understanding the hierarchy, the supertype, the subtypes. If you're selling books, and then the books are their fiction and nonfiction, right? If you're in a particular if you have customers, are there online customers, are there retail store customers? But within every organization there are hierarchies within those business concepts, and it's very important to capture those, and we'll get into a little bit more why that's important. And again, to reiterate, and I can't say this often enough, in this phase when we're taking that enterprise ontology approach, we want to not discuss the source system. And it's a very hard thing to do, to sit there and say, but in that source system, X, Y, and Z. No, let's take the time to listen to what the business is saying and capturing that information. And you'll also find in this exercise, when you're doing this, that you'll find there are aspects of the business that may call the same thing two different things, and that's a good exercise as well, because some oftentimes could lead into a governance conversation, but really to kind of weed that out and understand, well, what really is the business term for this concept. So with that, I'm going to now do a demonstration. I'm going to switch over to another application and kind of demonstrate walking through billing and ontology and taxonomy. Okay, we've transitioned over to, I'm going to be using for the demo a tool called Ellie, but you can really use Visio or just about any other type of diagramming solution to do this exercise. Um, and when I'm doing this exercise, I make sure I'm always with a group of business folks. It could be leadership, it could be subject matter experts, but really getting a variety of perspectives on the business that'll help you hone in that ontology and taxonomy. And you'll also identify where there might be discrepancies in how people see the business, and that can bring up some great conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just building an ontology. And one example I want to give people in understanding how a certain scenario can dramatically change how that ontology might look. So, for example, I'm going to create an organization, and I'm just going to bring it in here. And let's just say this organization has two lines of business. Let's say they're in retail. And I'm going to just say that's a child of the organization. And they also have manufacturing. Right. And let's bring that into here. Stretch this out a little bit. Yeah. So we're saying this organization has a retail line of business and a manufacturing line of business. But they also have, let's say, a customer. Now, I have seen this scenario, and it's one that has been um, a gotcha, I guess you could say, in certain organizations, and it's something just to be aware of. So a an organization could have, say, one of many customers, but there have also been organizations where the customer can't be, say, shared amongst the different lines of business. There could be regulatory reasons, the way their organization has been set up, that they may not be able to share the customer. So you could have this scenario where an organization has one or many customers, but you could also have a scenario where maybe there is retail customer, and let's just say there's a manufacturing customer, right? So within that organization now, you kind of have two different perspectives, right? So again, just for the sake of this exercise, I'll show this. You could say that an organization has one of many customers, but there have been scenarios where maybe the lines of businesses or the book of businesses may have independent customers and they cannot be shared. And I'm bringing this up because it's always a good exercise when you're talking with the business folks is to really dive into an understanding, especially when you get into different lines of business or if you get into different domains where they might use the same terms, but sometimes they can mean different things. So again, in the retail organization, they might say they have their customers, and the manufacturing has their customers. So it's really diving in to that scenario. So I'm going to clear this out, and I'm just going to go into an example for this exercise. So I'm going to say I'm working with an organization, and we're going to make it a simple just a simple ontology for this organization. So we're going to say that they have customers. And in talking with them, they also say that, well, they have customers who are, um, could be a person, could be a customer. And they may also have, let's just say, organizations um, that could be a customer. Just for color purposes. So this organization has customers, and those customers can be people or organizations. Um, Now, what they do is they can say they sell orders, right? So the business may say we we sell orders, and so we'll bring that in. Oh, and by the way, we also do online orders. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can get that the taxonomy aspect of this. So they do online orders, and let's just say they also have point of sale type of orders that so you could go into a store and they have those scenarios, right? So uh, clean this up a little bit, right? So in here we can say a customer can have one of many orders, right? So we've drawn that portion out, and let's say now that they have a variety of locations, right? So we'll bring that over here. But in those locations, again, doing that hierarchy, they might have stores, bring that over here. And then they might also have, let's say, warehouses. And I'm just kind of making this up as I go. But so let's just say for those locations, one thing I like about this tool is that I can kind of embed the hierarchies within the objects. There. Let's bring that over a little bit. Oops. All right. So now we have that. And then we'll say that, oh, and for the orders, we know we sell products. So create products. Make this a little bit bigger because I want to again show a little bit of a hierarchy scenario here. So, and let's just say one of their products is books. And so we'll bring this down in here. And what I really want to show here again is that of books, they sell fiction. We're going to have nonfiction. Right. And again, I'm just trying to demonstrate the concepts again of as we're building this ontology is really drilling into that taxonomy. And as we get further into the exercise of building your data vault, these types of things come into conversation as you start determining which grain your hubs might want to be at. Where's your sweet spot in terms of that taxonomy that you will want to make for a fit for your business. And I'm going to create, let's just say another product that they might sell is apparel. Just bring that into here. And let's make up one more and we'll just say they do appliances. And I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to drill into the taxonomies of each of these. But as you could see, I could go into appliances and say, there could be kitchen appliances. Well, obviously most of them are kitchen, but it could be washer or dryer. It could be other types of things that they might sell in the appliances. And those are the things you would add into your ontology and the taxonomy within here. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here. Clean this up afterwards. So of these orders, we know they want to, for these orders, they want to sell them onto these products onto these orders. So let's just say we have an order. We have order lines, could be order details, could be a variety of things, right? So we'll bring that down to here and we'll say, okay, an order can have many order lines and a product can be associated to many order lines. Clean this up here. There. And we kind of showed that a product can be sold on many order lines and an order can have many order lines as well. Of these products, well, they will say these products are created by vendors. Vendor, and we'll, again, here I'll say that a vendor can provide, manufacture, whatever, multiple products. Then the other thing I want to bring into play here is, well, there's inventory of these products. So let's just say we'll have another object here called inventory, and I'll bring that down to here. Now, again, this is where that interesting conversation can be around an organization's ontology. So of this inventory, we could sit here and say, and for the sake of this, I'm going to just put it, and we'll say our locations have inventory and the products also belong to the inventory. But stores may have an independent set of inventory than the warehouses, right? And again, having those conversations with your um, subject matter experts and other people within an organization is really where you can dive into some of these details and then determine, how they capture inventory in a warehouse might be different than they capture in a store. A warehouse might have to have, it could be row number, bin number, and other things like that, where things in versus a store could be, an aisle number. But for the sake of this exercise and time, I'm just going to leave it as this way, is just something simple. And then the last connection I want to make is that, well, the point of sales, I'm going to show that here that not all locations have a point of sale, but the stores do. So I'm just going to draw a relationship from the stores to the point of sale, right? And again, really giving a different perspective into um, the diagram here in terms of that perspective of that only a store can have point of sale systems. And so ultimately, this is a very simplistic ontology with a taxonomy built into it. So we can work with the business experts and your subject matter experts to really, really blow this out and get into detail. Now, you might say, well, Keith, that could take a very long exercise, and we want to get into building our data vault. And that is a true statement. And when you're doing this exercise, you don't have to do the entire enterprise. As we've said about data vault, it is a agile friendly way of doing data management, right? So in this exercise, do the same thing. Identify a domain, a subject area that kind of fits where the business wants to from a priority, and then really dive into that. And that will help you get to detail, but then at the same time, move on to start getting um, into developing your data vault and getting business value. Again, ultimately, we're doing this to get business value. And at the same time, put that into a perspective and in a way that makes sense to the business. So, with this model, I'm now going to go back to my slides and we'll continue the discussions on what would be. Okay, so now I've taken a screenshot of what I just did on the and building out that ontology. And as we can see, and I hope that brought a little bit of understanding in terms of the the uh, the methodology in which you want to go about capturing this information. I mean, this was a very simplistic exercise, and it could be a much longer, drawn out exercise. But again, as stated, this is a very agile process. You don't have to define your entire business ontology in one sitting. You oftentimes, in the way I've done it, is like the areas of the ontology can kind of relate to the use cases in the domains or whatever your project and your business is focusing on, and really hyper focusing on drawing out that area. But too many times I see people skip this process, and it really is important to make sure that you are taking the time to capture that. So again, here we have the ontology and a little bit of taxonomy to go along with it for the sake of this presentation. So now that we've finished, I'm going to call this step one, which is really identifying the ontology and taxonomy. We're going to move to step two, the next step, which is now what we want to do is design a business view data vault. Also, a business centric data vault. What we want to do is take the ontology and taxonomy we did and now start to identify what are the data vault concepts or objects within that. And again, when we were talking about the ontology and the taxonomy, you want to find that sweet spot in terms of it. Maybe there's a level in the taxonomy that is a better fit for that certain area for your hubs. Is it the higher level? Is it a lower level? But really finding what is the right fit for your organization in terms of defining those hubs. Again, to really reiterate it, and I've been saying it again, is even in this phase, at this point, we are not discussing anything about the source system. It's not to sit here and say, well, the source system won't map to this. Right now, it's to sit here and say, okay, we've done the business ontology, but now let's turn that ontology into a business-centric data vault. So again, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to transition back over to the diagram, and we're going to work on converting that diagram into a data vault, business-centric data vault. Okay, so we've now switched back over to the diagram I was showing earlier of the ontology and taxonomy. The exercise we're going to do now, as we were just discussing, is we're going to put this into a data vault model. And that'll going to kind of give us a target raw vault scenario. And back to what I was talking about earlier and understanding the taxonomy of the organization, this is where you're going to want to start going through and identifying, especially your hubs and your links. And what grain and things you're going to put that at. And what I like to do is just kind of go through and walk through. Do I want a person hub and so no, we're going to create a customer hub. And what I like to do is just kind of I just change the colors on things. So for the sake of this, I'm going to just make it purple. And I'm going to do an orders hub. And it's just a way for me to go through and color code. This is a many-to-many scenario. And when we see a many-to-many scenario, then that's going to be a link. So again, I am going to just, let's see, we'll just make that into, for now, I'm just picking different colors so that we can tell. A vendor, well, we're going to make that into a hub. And then now again in this area, what do I want to do? Do I want a hub for books or apparel? And in just talking with the business, no, we're just going to go with product. So we're just going to make the product itself be a hub. Again, inventory is a many-to-many relationship. But what I'm going to do is make a slight change here. What we may have discussed and decided with our business partners was that they really see the inventory differently from the stores and the warehouses. So I am just going to now create a inventory, and I'm going to create a warehouse inventory. Kind of change this up a little bit. And again, just to give you kind of an example of an experience or a scenario you might find in working with an organization or a client or even within your own organization. I didn't want to do that. I got a little jumpy with the all right. Delete that, and I'm going to delete that. All right. And just again, kind of show this here and here. And now these we're going to say are going to come into being link tables. All right. So I've kind of quickly gone through and I've identified through my model what I think things will need to be within my data vault. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go and create a brand new model, and I'm just going to call it Ontology raw vault, just for the sake of this. And now I'm going to do and start taking that same model that we've done, except now I'm going to put it more into our data vault looking type of model. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create, and so I'm going to have our hub customer. Over here, I am going to create our hub order. Put that over here. Hub product. Again, I'm just using, you don't see it, but I'm just using that other model as my reference point to building this out. I got my products, and let's see, I'm going to do a link. Um, Customer order. That over here. And I'm going to say, we know one of those other ones we had identified a many to many. So we had a link order line. And we'll put that over here. And only draw these up, right? So we're going to say, this is a link between our order and our customer. And now I'm also going to have a relationship between our order and our order line. And then we're going to put the hub product there. So as you can see, we've maintained some of the core business context, but now we're putting it into that data vault model, into that many-to-many scenario. Let's So of our products, we also had our vendors. So I'm going to do our vendor. I'm going to do a link vendor product. And again, I'm going to reiterate, and I've said this a few times, and I'm going to say it again because it can't be said enough times, is that never once am I discussing or talking about what the actual source systems look like. I'm really trying to attack this from a non-biased perspective and really get that view from what the business wants to see that data. And I'm going to go back now. We had those warehouse, do a hub warehouse, and then we're going to have a hub store, because again, we decided to break out the inventory, and the inventory, because it's a many to many, we'll do a link store inventory. Put that there, and then I'm going to have a link warehouse inventory. I'm going to kind of move it over here. All right, and we can do this. Quickly draw this up. So as you can see, we pretty much have the same model as we had before, but now it's taken on that raw vault perspective, right? So now we've taken that model, which was our business ontology, and we have mapped it and we've put it into a raw vault perspective. So that would be the step 2 in the phase, right? We did the ontology and taxonomy. Now we've kind of mapped that into a data vault perspective. And now I'm going to switch on back over to the slides, and we're going to talk about step 3. Okay, so now we're switched back over to my slides. And again, I've taken a screenshot of the of what we did. And as you can see, we took that same ontology, a lot of the same business concepts here, but now we've restructured it to look like a data vault. So we've kind of blended the ontology and taxonomy into a data vault. And I call it like this is a target conceptual business centric data vault that can mean something to the organization when they're looking at this. It means something to them and gives us a target perspective in terms of how this data vault will look. Now, I've seen it many times as you go along in projects, you will find that the model can adjust and change. And again, one of the great things about Data Vault is that, some people use the term fail fast, is that as you're doing in an agile setting, as you build your hubs in your satellites to go along with this, if it doesn't fit, it's very quickly to build a different one, and always trying to strive towards bringing that business value. But ultimately, here, like we said, we are now speaking in a language that the business can understand and relate to. So now that we've kind of done step 1 and 2, now we're going to take a bottom up approach. We've kind of done the conceptual, business centric view of our target data vault. Now we do need to bring our source system into that view. So now we've started with the top down perspective. Now let's take that bottom up. We got to make the two worlds come together. So now in this exercise, we're going to start to map how a source system, right, that we're bringing in is going to map to that business um, centric data vault that we put together, and see if we can marry those two worlds together. Bring the bottom up, bring the top down and the bottom up together. So just kind of do a little basic exercise before that. But again, doing taking the business centric data vault design, map the source business objects, hubs, and links to that source system, right? And this is also, if you guys are familiar with doing satellites, right? This is where we now sit here and say satellites that associate to hubs, we divide our satellites by the different source systems, rate of change, right? And um, the data um, security type of reasons, right? Um, so we already know that each source system is probably going to have will have at least one satellite per source system, but oftentimes I've seen they could have many depending on what's going on with the other data elements coming from that source system. So I'm going to do just a kind of quick exercise to kind of show what that looks like. And so, for example, I might have two sources. For the sake of today, I'm going to call them Bravo and Tango. But I think many of you have worked in organizations, and many organizations happen to have business names, or even, if it's like SAP or other ones like that, they have unique names for their source system. So let's just say in this case, we have two source systems, Bravo and Tango. In Bravo, let's just say they have a few tables. They could have hundreds and hundreds of tables, but we find they have party role, party person, party organization, right? And there are many types of scenarios where this data might be being used within that application. We might also have another source system called Tango that has similar data, but they call it account person, account organization. Two different systems, probably supporting probably business similar types of operations. Could have been that these are two systems from two independent companies, and then when they say merge or an acquisition, these two brought to the table, or one was a legacy system, one's a new system. There's many reasons why many source systems, right, come into play. And I think many of us have experienced those. But in this case, I'm going to really identify that we're really going to focus on just in this exercise, like one business concept, right? In this case, we're going to say customer. So in the previous diagrams, right, we had a lot of different hubs. But for this mapping exercise, I'm going to focus on one, because this exercise that we're doing is kind of a rinse and repeat. What you do for one hub and a link and another hub is really the same exercise. But here, what we're going to do is say, well, how would these source systems, which tables in these source systems map to this particular hub? Now, if you remember in the first taxonomy that we did, that a customer in the taxonomy, they had people and organizations, right? And in our party, we can see there are people and organizations and roles. So more than likely, one of the roles could be customer or other things like that. So we're going to map that the party person has the data elements that we're going to need for that customer. and also from the party organization table, right? So that's from the Bravo system. And at the same time, we'll have identified that what was the business key within these structures that is common between the two source systems. And then the other part, now we have the source system Tango. And again, which tables are we going to use to build the satellites associated with customer? So now we've kind of mapped that, hey, from this source system in this source system, these are the data structures that we need to use to then populate satellites associated to this hub. And as we all know, within Data Vault, this isn't going to be one common ETL job, right? Each one of these sources to the target, right, become their own independent ELT process, or however you're loading your Data Vault, your raw vault, um, sets of jobs and runtimes, right? Making it that all of these scenarios, in this case, these four, can be done at different points in time. You could sit here in sprint one, I'm doing party person, sprint two, party organization. And that's one of the beauties of doing Data Vault. So after we've done this mapping exercise, so what might that Data Vault model look like, right? And it might probably would look something like this. And how I tend to do things. So again, hub customer is representing that business centric uh, view that the business wants. And then my satellites is where I tend to identify where it came from. Again, one of the things with Data Vault is that auditability back to the source, right? So in here, I kind of tend to identify that it's a satellite, that it was for the customer hub, and it's coming from source Bravo. So you might come up with a code for your source. And then I have that table name that's coming from party person. So this is very informative in terms of understanding what that went, right? So now for that one hub, we have 4 satellites that will be used. Now, again, doesn't mean it's going to be limited to 4, because especially if, say, for example, for the person, if there's PII type of data, you might choose to sit there and say, here's party person PII and then party person general, and taking those data elements that might be um, very personal and private and putting them into a separate table. But that's a discussion for another day. So really now what we've seen is how we've taken that business approach bottom top down, and that source system bottom up, and we brought those two worlds together. That now when the business goes in and they're looking for customer data, they're not looking at the party hub and the organization hub. They're looking at the customer hub to get to the point of what they needed. So to recap, again, we kind of went through a 3-step process. The first step, right, is doing that enterprise ontology. And I really, really want to stress the importance of that. I think many skip this process. Oh, I know the business, I know what we're doing. And it's always good to have, because when you're speaking with people in the business, they don't want to see diagrams and data models to that grain, but always happy to look at an enterprise ontology and really get an understanding of that business. And it's always good to get that confirmation back that your perspective of what you're showing the business looks like is then backed up by their seeing it and agreeing with it. Again, step 2, taking that on enterprise ontology and taxonomy, and then building out and driving that business centric data vault, changing that view a little bit for them to now you're starting to bring it closer to that raw vault, but holding true to the business centric view. And then lastly is mapping your source systems to that business centric data vault. And ultimately, at that point, you should have a very good business representation data vault that brings both pieces, the bottom up and the top down together. I know this was a very short session on this, but as an exercise, I highly recommend putting into your processes. If you're doing sprints is making sure that that enterprise ontology and doing this is part of that effort, even if you already have one, just to revisit and confirm it that it's worked, and not just to jump to your hubs, links, and satellites. So again, I'd like to thank you all for your time. I hope this was informative. Always happy to talk data modeling. If there's anything that you happen to see here that you either want more details on, want deeper discussions on, always happy to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Um, I always enjoy talking data vault and data modeling, and would be happy to answer any of your questions and have a discussion. Again, thank you very much.